Admiral Taeyong Kim stood on the bridge of the warship Indomitable, staring at the massive holographic display before him. The image showed hundreds of alien vessels hanging in space above Earth like dark clouds before a storm. Each ship was 3 times larger than anything humanity had ever built, or so the Vraxian Empire believed. The communication channel crackled to life. A face appeared on the screen, reptilian and cruel, with 4 eyes that gleamed with satisfaction. Overlord Dexvol, Supreme Commander of the Vraxian fleet, looked down at the human admiral with obvious contempt. "Your 30 cycles are nearly expired." "Human," Dexvol said, his voice like gravel grinding against metal. "Where is your surrender?" Taeyong kept his expression neutral. Beside him, Captain Hannah Park tensed, her hand moving closer to her sidearm. The admiral gave her a subtle shake of his head. "Not yet. We need more time to evacuate our civilians," Taeyong replied calmly. "Surely your empire can grant us this small mercy." Dexvol laughed, a horrible sound that made several bridge officers flinch. "Mercy? You softskins know nothing of the galaxy? We have conquered 847 star systems. Entire civilizations have knelt before us or been erased from existence. Your primitive world will be no different." The transmission ended abruptly. Taeyong turned away from the screen and walked to the observation window. Earth hung below them, blue and green and beautiful. Billions of people lived on that world, unaware of how close they stood to annihilation. "Admiral," Hannah said quietly, "the evacuation ships are ready. On your order, we can begin sending them away." "No," Taeyong said. "Keep them here. We'll need them for something else." Hannah's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. She had served under the Admiral for 15 years. She trusted him completely. In another part of the ship, Dr. Jae-won Lee worked frantically in the weapons laboratory. His fingers flew across the holographic controls, checking and rechecking the calculations. The quantum compression device had to work perfectly. There would be no second chances. "Dr. Lee," a voice called from the doorway. Ambassador Marie Choi stepped into the room, her diplomatic robes looking out of place among the military equipment. "I just finished the broadcast to the Vraxian fleet. I told them we accept their terms." Jae-won looked up, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "Did they believe you?" "Of course," Marie said with a thin smile. "They think we're terrified. They think we're weak." She paused. "Are we really going to do this? Attack an empire that has conquered nearly 1,000 worlds?" "We don't have a choice," Jae-won replied. "They gave us none?" Marie nodded slowly. She had spent 20 years as Earth's ambassador to the known galaxy. She had met hundreds of alien species, negotiated countless treaties, and always advocated for peace. But the Vraxians were different. They didn't negotiate. They didn't compromise. They simply took what they wanted. She had tried reasoning with them when their fleet first arrived 6 months ago. She had offered trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and resource sharing. Overlord Dexvol had listened politely, then informed her that humanity had 2 choices, surrender or die. "How long until Protocol Horizon is complete?" Myra asked. 72 hours, Jae-won said. "Everything is in position. We just need to keep them believing we're beaten." Up on the bridge, Taeyong received a coded message on his personal console. He read it quickly, then deleted it. The message had come from deep space, from ships that officially didn't exist. They were ready. For 50 years, humanity had been preparing for this moment. Not specifically for the Vraxians, but for any threat that might emerge from the darkness between stars. When humans first developed faster-than-light travel and discovered they were not alone in the universe, the initial reaction had been joy. First contact was supposed to be a moment of celebration. Instead, humanity found a galaxy at war. Empires rose and fell. Smaller species were enslaved or exterminated. Peace was temporary, violence was constant. Earth's leaders quickly realized that appearing weak and insignificant was the best protection. Let the great powers ignore humanity while humans built their strength in secret. The Vraxian Empire had grown fat on easy conquests. For 3,000 years they had faced no real opposition. Their military doctrine hadn't evolved in centuries. They relied on overwhelming numbers and brute force, never expecting their victims to fight back effectively. Captain Park, send a message to all Earth defense stations. Begin Phase 1 of Protocol Horizon. Yes, sir, Hannah replied. Her fingers moved across her console, sending encrypted signals across the solar system. On Earth's surface, massive underground facilities hummed to life. Civilians boarded evacuation ships, but these vessels didn't leave the system. Instead, they moved to predetermined coordinates, forming a protective sphere around Earth at a distance of 2 million kilometers. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, hidden installations activated their power cores. What appeared to be simple mining stations revealed their true nature. Weapons platforms, each carrying enough firepower to level a continent, turned their sensors toward the Vraxian fleet on Luna, humanity's moon. The largest military base ever constructed completed its final preparations. 500 warships sat in underground hangars, their engines already running, their weapons charged and ready. Overlord Dexville watched from his flagship as the human evacuation began. He saw the civilian ships spreading out from Earth and smiled. The humans were running just as he expected. Cowards, all of them. War Priest Clavdor, Dexville called. What is your assessment? The War Priest, an older Vraxian covered in battle scars, studied the tactical display with narrowed eyes. Something is wrong, Overlord. The evacuation pattern makes no tactical sense. They're not fleeing to deep space. They're repositioning within the system. You worry too much, Dexville said dismissively. They're primitives trying to save themselves. There's no strategy here, only desperation. Clavdor wanted to argue but held his tongue. The Overlord had not survived to his position by listening to caution. Pride and aggression had won him his rank. Those same qualities might doom him now, but that was not something a war priest could say aloud. 20-4 hours passed. Then 48. The Vraxian fleet remained in position, confident and patient. Their sensors detected nothing unusual. The human military vessels stayed near Earth, making no aggressive moves. Everything appeared normal. On the indomitable, Admiral Taeyong Kim slept for the first time in days. In 6 hours, the deadline would expire. In 6 hours, the Vraxians would learn the truth about humanity. He needed to be rested for what was coming. Captain Hannah Park stood watch on the bridge, her eyes on the countdown timer. Around her, the crew worked quietly, efficiently. There was no fear in their faces. Only determination. They had all lost someone to the great powers of the galaxy. A colony ship destroyed by raiders. A research station enslaved by the Corvinthi Empire. An explorer vessel that never returned from Vraxian space. Humanity had suffered in silence for generations, pretending to be weak, pretending to accept their place as a minor species. That pretense was about to end. Captain Hannah Park sat in the command chair of the Silent Dawn, a ship that technically didn't exist in any official registry. Around her, the bridge was dark except for the soft blue glow of the control panels. Every system ran on minimum power. In the void of space, the carrier was invisible. Status report, Hannah said quietly. All fighter wings ready for deployment, Commander Gong Hyan Quan replied from the tactical station. Pilots are in their cockpits. Quantum neural links established. Communication silence holding, Lieutenant Sumin Yu added. No emissions detected from our fleet. The Vraxians still don't know we're here. Hannah allowed herself a small smile. The Ghost Fleet had been humanity's most closely guarded secret for 5 decades. 500 warships, built in hidden shipyards far beyond Earth's solar system. Each vessel incorporated technology that shouldn't exist according to conventional physics, the quantum phase. Cloak was Dr. Jae-won Lee's masterpiece. It didn't just bend light around the ships or absorb sensor waves. It shifted the vessels slightly out of phase with normal spacetime. To any observer, the ships simply weren't there. They existed in a state between dimensions, visible only to other Ghost Fleet vessels using the same quantum signature. Engineer Hyeon, Hannah called to the young woman monitoring the cloak systems. How are we holding up? Stable, Captain, Hyam Park replied. She wasn't related to Hana, but they'd served together for 3 years. We can maintain phase cloak for another 72 hours before we need to recharge the quantum cores. We won't need that long, Hana said. In 48 hours, this will all be over. She stood and walked to the observation window. Space looked empty, but she knew better. Spread out in a perfect three-dimensional sphere around the Vraxian fleet were 500 human warships. The Vraxians sat in the center like insects in a web, completely unaware of the trap closing around them. Commander Donghayan reviewed the tactical data one more time. The Vraxians had 2,000 ships in Earth's orbit. Each vessel carried enough firepower to destroy a city. Their shields could withstand nuclear weapons. Their hulls were reinforced with alloys mined from neutron stars. On paper, humanity stood no chance. 2,000 against 500 was terrible odds. The Vraxian ships were also larger, with more armor and bigger guns, but the Vraxians didn't know about the spatial compression weapons. They didn't know about the AI-enhanced fighters. They didn't know that every single human warship had been designed specifically to counter Vraxian technology. Captain, Sumin said suddenly. I'm detecting unusual chatter from the Vraxian fleet. Let me hear it, Hannah ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life. Vraxian voices, translated by the computer, filled the room. Gravitational sensors are showing anomalies across all quadrants. Probably stellar activity. The humans call this system unstable. Should we investigate? The Overlord says no. We attack in 47 hours. He wants all ships in position. The transmission ended. Hannah exchanged glances with her officers. The Vraxians had detected something. Their sensors were picking up the gravitational distortions caused by 500 massive warships, even while cloaked. But they were dismissing it as natural phenomena. They almost found us, Donghayan said quietly. Almost, Hannah agreed. But almost doesn't matter. She returned to her chair and pulled up the tactical display. The Ghost Fleet was positioned in Formation Omega, a pattern developed specifically for this scenario. Every ship had multiple firing solutions calculated. Every captain knew their role. When the cloak dropped, they would have a 30-second window before the Vraxians could react. Those 30 seconds would decide the battle. Take us closer to the Vraxian flagship, Hannah ordered. I want detailed scans of their shield generators. The Silent Dawn moved silently through space, passing within 10 kilometers of a massive Vraxian battlecruiser. The enemy ship's sensors swept right past them, detecting nothing. Hannah watched the scan data flow across her screens. Interesting, she murmured. Their shields are designed to deflect energy weapons. Plasma cannons, particle beams, electromagnetic pulse weapons. But look at the harmonic frequency. Donghayan studied the data. They're vulnerable to kinetic impact. Old-fashioned mass acceleration weapons. Exactly, Hannah said. They've been fighting energy-based civilizations for so long they've forgotten about simple physics. A solid projectile moving at a fraction of light speed will punch right through those shields. It was a weakness humanity had specifically designed to exploit. While other species focused on more exotic weapons, human engineers had perfected railgun technology. Magnetic acceleration of dense metal slugs to incredible velocities. Simple, reliable, and against these shields, devastatingly effective. Over the next 12 hours, the Silent Dawn cataloged every weakness in the Vraxian formation. Ships were clustered too close together. Their point defense systems had blind spots. Their command structure relied on the flagship for coordination. If that ship was disabled, the entire fleet would fall into chaos. Send this data to Admiral Kim, Hannah ordered. Encrypted quantum burst. Transmission sent, Sumin confirmed. Admiral acknowledges receipt. Hannah knew that Taeyang would be sharing this information with every ship in the Ghost Fleet when the battle began. Every captain would know exactly where to shoot for maximum effect. She thought about the crews of those Vraxian ships. Thousands of beings, maybe millions across the entire fleet. Most of them were probably just following orders. They had families waiting for them back home. They probably didn't want this war any more than humans did, but they had made their choice. They had come to Earth's system with demands and threats. They had given humanity no option but surrender or death. Now humanity would give them the same choice. Commander Dong Hyen was in the fighter bay, addressing his pilots. 200 men and women sat in their cockpits, neural interface cables connected to their skulls. The fighters they piloted were small, fast, and deadly. "Listen up," Dong Hyen said over the squadron comm. "When we decloak, you'll have eye support like you've trained for. The computer will handle navigation and targeting. Your job is tactical decision-making and overall strategy." It was a partnership between human and machine that had taken 20 years to perfect. The AI could process millions of data points per second, adjusting course and targeting faster than any biological mind. But it lacked creativity, intuition, and the ability to think beyond its programming. Human pilots provided those elements. Together, they were unstoppable. "Remember," Dong Hyen continued, "the Vraxians are used to fighting species that panic. Show them what happens when they face an enemy that doesn't break." The pilots responded with grim determination. Many of them were young, barely 20 years old, but they had trained their entire lives for this. They were ready, back on the bridge. Hannah received another message from Admiral Kim. The countdown timer appeared on her display. 36 hours until the Vraxian ultimatum expired. 36 hours until humanity revealed its teeth. "All hands," Hannah announced over the ship-wide intercom. "Battle stations in 35 hours. Get some rest while you can. Eat a good meal. Call your families if you need to. When this starts, there won't be time for anything except fighting." She cut the connection and looked around her bridge. These people were her responsibility. She would do everything in her power to bring them home safely. But she also knew the reality of war. Some of them wouldn't survive what was coming. "Captain," Engineer Hyen said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. Do you think we'll win?" Hannah considered the question carefully. Around them, invisible in the darkness, 500 of humanity's finest warships waited. Below, on Earth, billions of people went about their lives, most of them unaware of the threat hanging over them. And ahead, the Vraxian fleet sat in arrogant confidence. "Yes," Hannah said finally, "we'll win. Because we have to." It wasn't a matter of probability or tactical advantage. It was simple truth. Humanity would win because the alternative was extinction. And humans had proven throughout their history that they would do anything. Pay any price to survive. The Ghost Fleet continued its silent watch, counting down the hours until the galaxy learned what happened when you threatened. Earth. Admiral Taeyang Kim checked the countdown one last time. 24 hours remained before the Vraxian ultimatum expired. Around him, the bridge of the Indomitable hummed with quiet activity. Every station was manned. Every weapon was ready. Every crew member knew their role. "Ambassador Choi is ready to broadcast," Captain Hannah Park reported from her station. "Good," Taeyang said. "Signal the Ghost Fleet. Decloak in 5 minutes. All ships, all quadrants simultaneously." The order went out through quantum-encrypted channels. 500 ships that had remained hidden for weeks received the same message at the exact same moment. Their captains acknowledged and prepared. In the Vraxian flagship, Overlord Thexville sat on his command throne, reviewing the final attack plans. In 24 hours, his fleet would descend on Earth and crush any resistance. The humans would learn what happened to species that defied the Vraxian Empire. "Overlord," a sensor officer called out, "we're detecting massive gravitational fluctuations across all sectors. More stellar activity?" Thexville asked, bored. "No, sir. These readings are different. They're localized and growing stronger." War Priest Clavdor stood up from his station, his eyes fixed on the sensor display. Something was very wrong. The gravitational distortions were appearing in a perfect spherical pattern around the Vraxian fleet. That couldn't be natural. "Battle stations," Clavdor shouted. "All ships, raise shields immediately." "What are you doing?" Thexville demanded. "There's no threat here." Overlord, I think we're about to. The universe seemed to shift. Across the entire battle space, reality rippled. Space itself appeared to tear open as 500 massive warships materialized from nowhere. They appeared simultaneously, surrounding the Vraxian fleet in a perfect three-dimensional cage on the Indomitable's bridge. Taeyang watched his tactical display light up with green markers. Every Ghost Fleet vessel had decloaked successfully. The Vraxians were completely surrounded. "Open all communication channels," Taeyang ordered. "Maximum broadcast power? I want every ship in this system to hear this." Ambassador Mireille Choi appeared on every screen, every monitor, every communication device in the solar system. Her voice was calm but carried an edge of steel that made even experienced soldiers pay attention. "Attention, Vraxian fleet. This is Ambassador Mireille Choi, speaking on behalf of humanity and the planet Earth. You came to our home with threats. You gave us an ultimatum. You believed we were weak." On the Vraxian flagship, Dexville stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His fleet of 2,000 ships was surrounded by vessels that dwarfed his battle cruisers. The human ships were massive, bristling with weapons he didn't recognize. Energy readings suggested power cores far beyond anything the Vraxian Empire possessed. "You made a mistake," Mireille continued. "You threatened our home. You threatened our families. You threatened our future. We gave you 30 days, and in that time, we prepared. Not to surrender? To fight," Dexville found his voice. "This is a trick. Holographic projections? The humans don't have this technology." Taeyang smiled coldly. "Show them." The Indomitable targeted a small, uninhabited moon orbiting one of the system's outer planets. Every ship in the Ghost Fleet had a clear view. The flagship's main weapon powered up, a spatial compression cannon that bent the laws of physics. A beam of twisted space-time lanced out from the Indomitable and struck the moon. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the entire moon collapsed in on itself, compressed into a singularity the size of a marble before exploding in a burst of radiation. The demonstration lasted 3 seconds. The moon that had existed for billions of years was simply gone. Silence filled every communication channel. Even the Vraxians, who had conquered hundreds of worlds, had never seen a weapon like that. "That was a warning shot," Mireille said quietly. "Now I will give you the same choice you gave us. You have 6 hours to power down your weapons and retreat from this system. If you comply, you will be allowed to leave unharmed. If you refuse, we will defend our home with everything we have." Overlord Dexville's face appeared on the human communication screens. His 4 eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and rage. "You dare threaten the Vraxian Empire? We have conquered 847 star systems. We are the dominant power in this galaxy." "Were," Taeyang said, speaking for the first time. "You were the dominant power." Past tense. He gestured to his tactical officer, who brought up a new display. It showed Vraxian military installations across 50 light-years. At each location, human ships had appeared. Smaller fleets than the Ghost Fleet, but still significant. The Vraxians had no nearby reinforcements. Every staging area, every supply depot, every military base within range was already under human surveillance. "We've been watching you for 50 years, Taeyang continued. "We know your fleet deployments. We know your military doctrine. We know your weaknesses. We know everything about you. You know nothing about us." War Priest Clavdor stepped forward on the Vraxian bridge. "Overlord, I advise retreat. We cannot win this battle. These ships are technologically superior to ours. Their positioning is perfect. If we fight, we will be destroyed." Silence. Dexville roared. "I will not be frightened by primitives with a few fancy weapons. They're bluffing." "Are we?" Mireille asked. She nodded to someone off-screen. Throughout the Ghost Fleet, every ship powered up their weapons simultaneously. The energy signatures were staggering. Vraxian sensors went into alarm as they detected the massive power buildup. Railgun systems charged. Missile tubes opened. Spatial compression cannons hummed with barely contained force. 5 hours and 59 minutes remaining, Myray said. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. The human ships remained in position, weapons ready but not firing. Waiting on the Vraxian flagship, chaos erupted. Officers shouted conflicting reports. Sensor data was analyzed and reanalyzed. Battle plans were drawn up and immediately discarded. Nothing in their military history prepared them for this situation. The Vraxian Empire had always been the predator. They chose when to attack, when to negotiate, when to show mercy. They had never been the prey before. We should attack now, Vexville insisted. We still outnumber them 4-1. Clavdor brought up tactical projections. Their positioning neutralizes our numerical advantage, Overlord. We're clustered together. They're spread out in optimal firing positions. When the battle starts, they'll be able to concentrate fire on individual ships while maintaining dispersed formations. And that weapon they demonstrated ... was probably their only one. Vexville interrupted. A prototype. They're trying to scare us with smoke and mirrors. But doubt had entered the Overlord's voice. Clavdor heard it. So did the other officers on the bridge. They had all seen the moon disappear. They had all watched 500 massive warships appear from nowhere. These were not the actions of a weak species bluffing with limited resources. Sir, a communication officer said nervously, we're receiving reports from our outposts. Human ships have appeared at Base Kolvar. At Station X at the supply depot in the Ravik system. All our nearby military installations are under observation. Vexville's hands clenched on his command throne. All of them? Yes, sir. The humans have somehow positioned fleets at every strategic location within 50 light-years of Earth. It was impossible. It required a level of coordination and intelligence gathering that should have taken decades. The humans had known exactly where to position their forces for maximum psychological and strategic impact. Clavdor understood the message clearly. Humanity was demonstrating that they could have attacked at any time. They could have struck Vraxian military bases, supply lines, and command centers simultaneously. But they hadn't. They had waited. They had given the Vraxians a chance to back down. Overlord, Clavdor said quietly, we should accept their terms. Retreat now while we still can. We can rebuild, learn from this, and perhaps— No! Vexville stood up, his 4 eyes blazing with fury. The Vraxian Empire does not retreat. We do not bow to lesser species. If the humans want war, we will give them war. He turned to his weapons officer. Begin charging all cannons. Prepare the fleet for battle formation Alpha. We attack in 1 hour. Clavdor felt his heart sink. Pride had doomed many warriors throughout history. Now it would doom them all. On the Indomitable, sensors detected the Vraxian fleet beginning to power up their weapons. Taeyang had hoped it wouldn't come to this. He had genuinely wanted to give the Vraxians a chance to leave peacefully. They're not backing down, Captain Hanna reported. Taeyang nodded slowly. I didn't think they would. Notify all Ghost Fleet vessels. Begin final battle preparations. And someone get me Dr. Lee. I want to make sure those spatial compression weapons don't malfunction when we need them most. He stood and walked to the observation window, looking down at Earth, his home. With billions of people who would never know how close they came to annihilation. He would fight for them. If necessary, he would die for them, but the Vraxians would learn an important lesson today. Humanity could be peaceful. Humanity preferred negotiation to violence. But when forced to fight, humanity fought to win. The countdown reached 0. Admiral Taeyang Kim stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, his hands clasped behind his back. Around him, every officer sat at their station, fingers hovering over controls. The tension was so thick it could be cut with a knife. All ships report ready, Captain Hanna Park said quietly. Weapons charged. Targeting solutions locked. Very well, Taeyang said. He took a deep breath. All Ghost Fleet vessels, this is Admiral Kim. The Vraxians have made their choice. We tried peace. They chose war. Remember what we're fighting for. Remember Earth. Remember humanity. He paused. All ships. Dire. The space around Earth lit up like 1,000 suns. Every human warship fired simultaneously. Spatial compression cannons unleashed beams of twisted reality. Railguns accelerated metal slugs to incredible speeds. Missile pods opened and launched thousands of guided warheads. The opening salvo was overwhelming. The Vraxian fleet, clustered together in their traditional battle formation, had nowhere to run. 300 Vraxian ships simply ceased to exist in the first 10 seconds. The spatial compression weapons hit them like the fist of an angry god. Ships that had survived 1,000 battles collapsed in on themselves, crushed into singularities smaller than atoms before exploding in bursts of radiation. Overlord Dexvol screamed orders from his command throne, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Alarms blared throughout the flagship. Damage reports flooded in from every direction. Section 7 is gone. Shields failing on the port side. We've lost contact with Battle Group Kresh. War Priest Clavdor gripped his station as the flagship shuddered from multiple impacts. A railgun slug punched through their shields as if they weren't there, tearing through 3 decks before exiting the other side of the ship. The Vraxian shields were designed to deflect energy weapons. Against solid projectiles moving at a fraction of light speed, they were useless. Return fire. Dexvol roared. All ships, target the nearest human vessel. The Vraxian fleet began to respond. Plasma cannons charged and fired. Energy beams lanced out toward the Ghost fleet. For a moment, it looked like the Vraxians might turn the tide through sheer volume of fire, but the human ships were already moving. They didn't stay still like traditional warships. They danced through space with impossible agility, their AI-enhanced navigation systems calculating trajectories 1,000 times per second. Incoming fire from Vraxian cruiser-class vessels, the tactical officer reported on the Indomitable. Impact in 3 seconds. Evasive pattern Delta, Hannah ordered calmly. The massive warship rolled, twisted, and dove, moving like a fighter craft despite its enormous size. The Vraxian energy beams passed through empty space where the Indomitable had been moments before. Return fire, all forward batteries, Taeyang said. The Indomitable's railgun spoke. 12 slugs, each weighing several tons and moving at 90,000 kilometers per second, streaked toward the Vraxian cruiser. The first slug hit the shield and shattered it. The remaining 11 punched through the hull like bullets through paper. The Vraxian cruiser exploded in a ball of fire. In the fighter bay of the Silent Dawn, Commander Dong Hyen Quan felt the launch catapult engage. His fighter shot out of the carrier at tremendous speed. Around him, 200 other fighters deployed in perfect formation. Neural link established, the co-pilot said in his mind. All systems green. Target acquisition online. Good, Dong Hyen replied, his thoughts translating directly into commands. Wing leaders execute pattern Ragnarok. Focus on the Vraxian flagship. The fighter wings split into 4 groups, each approaching the massive Vraxian command ship from a different angle. The flagship's point defense systems opened fire, filling space with energy blasts and explosive rounds, but the human fighters were too fast. They jinked and weaved through the defensive fire, their AI systems predicting the trajectory of every shot microseconds before it fired. It looked like a dance, beautiful and deadly. First pass, Dong Hyen called. Light them up. The fighters screamed past the flagship, their weapons blazing. Missile pods launched armor-piercing warheads directly into the ship's engine ports. Railguns targeted sensor arrays and communication dishes. In 30 seconds, the flagship was crippled. Direct hit on their main reactor. Dong Hyen's wingman shouted. She's venting plasma. Inside the Vraxian flagship, emergency bulkheads slammed shut as sections of the ship lost pressure. Fires raged in multiple compartments. Vexvo watched his tactical display dissolve into static as the communication systems failed. Get me a damage report, he demanded. We've lost primary weapons, an officer reported, his voice shaking. Secondary shields are down. Life support is failing in 40% of the ship. Engines are offline. Clavdor was already moving toward the escape pods. Overlord, we need to evacuate. The ship is lost. No. Lexville grabbed his weapon. We fight. We can still win this. But even as he spoke, he knew it was a lie. Through the viewport, he could see his fleet burning. Hundreds of ships were already destroyed. The survivors were breaking formation, trying to flee, but the human vessels pursued them relentlessly. The Ghost Fleet had been designed for exactly this scenario. Every ship could operate independently or as part of a coordinated whole. When Vraxian vessels tried to run, human ships were already in position to intercept them. When they tried to fight, they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. On the Indomitable, Dr. J1 Lee monitored the weapon systems from his station on Earth. The spatial compression cannons were performing perfectly. Each shot required enormous power, but the quantum reactors were handling the load without any problems. Fire mission complete on Target Group 7, he reported to the Admiral. All enemy vessels in that sector are neutralized. Excellent, Taeyang responded. Redirect fire to Target Group 9. The battle had been raging for 27 minutes. In that time, the Vraxian fleet had been reduced to scattered, desperate remnants. Of the 2,000 ships that had surrounded Earth with such confidence, fewer than 300 remained combat effective. Captain Hannah Park on the Silent Dawn watched her tactical display with grim satisfaction. The carrier had taken minor damage from a lucky plasma blast, but the shields had held. Her fighters were performing beyond expectations. Recall the fighter wings, she ordered. Have them rearm and prepare for pursuit operations? But even as she spoke, she saw something on her sensors. The surviving Vraxian ships were broadcasting surrender signals. White flags in the ancient human tradition, translated through the communication protocol. Admiral, Hannah called over the fleet channel. Multiple enemy vessels are signaling surrender. Accept their surrender, Taeyang replied immediately. Any ship that powers down weapons and drops shields is to be left alone. We're not here to commit genocide. Throughout the Ghost Fleet, the order was received and obeyed. Human ships ceased fire on any Vraxian vessel that surrendered. But those that continued fighting were engaged without mercy, Commander. Donghayan led his fighters on one final pass against a Vraxian battlecruiser that was still shooting. The ship's captain was either brave or insane, refusing to surrender even as his vessel fell apart around him. Target their bridge, Donghayan ordered coldly. End this. A single missile, guided by AI precision, struck the battlecruiser's command center. The explosion tore through the bridge, and the ship went dark. Dead in space. 40-7 minutes after the first shot was fired, the battle was over. Admiral Taeyang Kim stood before his tactical display, looking at the results. Of the 2,000 Vraxian ships, 312 had survived. 200 of those had surrendered. The remaining 112 had managed to jump to. Faster than light speeds and flee the system, Taeyang had let them go deliberately. He wanted survivors. He wanted them to return to the Vraxian Empire and tell the story of what happened here. He wanted the galaxy to know that humanity was not to be threatened. The Ghost Fleet had lost 23 ships and 4,000 personnel. Every death weighed on Taeyang's shoulders, but he knew it could have been so much worse. The Vraxians had planned to exterminate billions. Instead, humanity had stopped them cold. Open a channel to the Vraxian flagship, Taeyang ordered. The screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the enemy command ship. It was a wreck. Smoke filled the air. Wounded Vraxians lay on the deck. And in the center of it all sat Overlord Dexville, his armor scorched and broken. This is Admiral Kim, Taeyang said quietly. Your fleet is defeated. Your flagship is crippled. You have two choices. Surrender and face trial for your crimes, or die here in the void. Choose now. Dexville looked at the human admiral. In his 4 eyes, Taeyang saw the death of arrogance. The Overlord had believed himself invincible. He had led countless conquests and never known defeat. Now he knew. I surrender, Dexville said, his voice barely a whisper. Wise choice, Taeyang replied. Prepared to be boarded. 1 week after the battle, Admiral Taeyang Kim stood before the Galactic Council for the first time in human history. The council chamber was massive, designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of different species. Beings of all shapes and sizes filled the seats, their eyes fixed on the human admiral. Beside him stood Ambassador Murray Choi, wearing her formal diplomatic robes. She had spent 20 years trying to get humanity a seat at this table. The council had always dismissed her requests. Earth was too small, too primitive, too insignificant. That had changed. The Galactic Council recognizes Admiral Taeyong Kim of Earth, Elder Counselor Vexmara announced. The ancient being looked like a tree crossed with an octopus, branches and tentacles moving independently. You have requested an emergency session. Speak. Taeyong stepped forward. He had prepared a speech, but looking at the faces around him, he decided to speak from the heart instead. 1 week ago, the Vraxian Empire gave humanity an ultimatum. Surrender or die. They brought 2,000 warships to Earth's orbit. They threatened to exterminate billions of people. And this council did nothing. Murmurs filled the chamber. Several counselors looked uncomfortable. We sent you messages, Murray added. We begged for help. We asked for mediation. We offered to accept any peaceful solution. You ignored every communication. The Vraxian Empire is powerful, Vexmara said carefully. The council has learned not to interfere in their affairs. It is regrettable, but... Regrettable? Taeyong's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. You were willing to let an entire species be destroyed because you were afraid. He activated a holographic projector. The battle played out before the council in stunning detail. Ships appearing from nowhere. The demonstration shot that destroyed a moon. The overwhelming firepower of the Ghost Fleet, the Vraxian fleet being systematically dismantled. The chamber fell silent as they watched. We didn't want this war, Taeyong continued. We spent 50 years preparing for it, but we never wanted it. We would have preferred peace. But when peace was denied to us, we were ready to fight. The hologram shifted, showing new images. Human shipyards, massive construction facilities hidden in remote star systems. Hundreds of warships in various stages of construction. Advanced weapons being tested. Training facilities where soldiers prepared for battles that might never come. For 50 years we built this fleet in secret, Taeyong said. We developed new technologies. We studied every major power in the galaxy and designed weapons specifically to counter their strengths. We prepared for the day when someone would threaten our home. Captain Hannah Park stood in the observation deck of the Silent Dawn, looking down at Earth. The planet was safe now. The Vraxian prisoners had been transferred to secure facilities. The damaged ships were being repaired. Life was returning to normal, but she knew that normal had changed forever. Captain, Lieutenant Sumin Yu approached. We're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Species that were conquered by the Vraxians are starting to rebel. They saw what happened here. They know the Empire can be beaten. Hannah smiled slightly. Good, maybe some good can come from this war after all. In the council chamber, Ambassador Murray was speaking now. Humanity demands the unconditional surrender of the Vraxian Empire. We demand war reparations for the threat against Earth. We demand that all species enslaved by the Vraxians be granted immediate independence. These demands are extreme, Vexmara said. The Vraxian Empire will never accept. The Vraxian Empire is in no position to refuse, Taeyong interrupted. He brought up a new holographic display showing the current disposition of human forces. We have fleets positioned at every major Vraxian military installation within 100 light years. We have the capability to strike their homeworld directly. They will accept our terms or they will face total defeat. It wasn't a bluff. In the days since the battle, humanity had moved swiftly. The Ghost Fleet had split into smaller task forces, each one positioning itself at strategic locations throughout Vraxian space. The empire that had seemed so powerful a week ago was now paralyzed, unable to respond to threats from every direction. And what of the council? Another counselor asked. What are humanity's intentions toward us? Taeyong looked around the chamber. That depends on you. We came here in peace. We asked for help and received none. We were forced to stand alone. That taught us an important lesson about the nature of galactic politics. He paused, letting his words sink in. From this day forward, humanity will no longer wait for permission to defend ourselves. We will no longer beg for seats at tables we've earned through our actions. We are here now, and we are here to stay. Mare stepped forward. We're also here to offer protection. Any species threatened by Imperial aggression can request assistance from Earth. We're establishing the Terran Accord, a mutual defense treaty. Any species that joins will have access to our military protection and our technology. The chamber erupted in conversation. The implications were staggering. Humanity was offering to become a military power on par with the old empires. Species that had lived in fear of conquest suddenly had an alternative. This is unprecedented, Vexmara said. The Council will need time to consider. Consider quickly, Taiyang said. The galaxy is changing. Species across known space are watching what happens here. They're deciding whether the Council is still relevant or whether new alliances will shape the future. Back on Earth, Dr. Jae-Won Lee met with representatives from a dozen different species. They had all sent delegations after seeing the battle footage. All of them wanted the same thing, access to human technology. The spatial compression weapon, a delegate from the Corvani Union said. If we could purchase the designs, no, Jae-Won said firmly. Humanity's advanced weapons are not for sale. However, we are willing to share defensive technologies with members of the Terran Accord. Shield improvements, sensor upgrades, things that will help you protect yourselves without becoming aggressive powers. It was a careful balance. Humanity didn't want to arm the galaxy for war, but they recognized that protection required strength. 1 month after the battle, Overlord Thexville stood trial. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy. Species from hundreds of worlds watched as the once mighty conqueror faced justice. The evidence was overwhelming. Thexville had ordered the destruction of civilian populations. He had enslaved entire species. He had committed atrocities across dozens of star systems. The tribunal found him guilty on all charges. Overlord Thexville, the judge said, you are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment on a penal colony. You will spend the rest of your days as a reminder that no empire, no matter how powerful, is above justice. Tae-Yang watched the sentencing from Earth. Some people had called for Thexville's execution, but he had argued against it. Killing the Overlord would make him a martyr. Letting him live as a powerless prisoner sent a stronger message. The Vraxian Empire formally surrendered 2 weeks later. The treaty was harsh but fair. They would release all conquered species. They would pay reparations. They would reduce their military to defensive forces only. And they would be monitored by human observers to ensure compliance. It was the end of an empire that had lasted 3,000 years. Captain Hannah Park walked through the corridors of the Silent Dawn one last time. The carrier was being decommissioned, its crew reassigned to new vessels. The Ghost Fleet was being reorganized into the Terran Defense Force. An official military branch rather than a secret project, she had been offered a promotion, command of one of the new supercarriers being built. She had accepted. The war might be over, but humanity's role in the galaxy was just beginning. In the council chamber, now with Earth's seat officially recognized, Ambassador Murray addressed the assembly. We didn't ask to become a military power, she said. We wanted to be explorers, scientists, diplomats, but the galaxy forced our hand. We were threatened with extinction and we survived by being strong. She looked around at the various species represented. Now we offer that strength to others. Not to conquer, not to dominate, but to protect. The Terran Accord stands ready to defend any species that cannot defend itself. We've proven we have the capability. Now we'll prove we have the wisdom to use it responsibly. The Council voted to formally recognize the Terran Accord. It wasn't unanimous, several of the older powers abstained, but it passed. Humanity had gone from ignored primitive species to major galactic player in the span of months. Admiral Tae-Yang Kim returned to Earth to a hero's welcome. Millions gathered to celebrate the fleet's victory. but he didn't feel like celebrating. He thought about the 4,000 personnel who died in the battle, the families that would never see their loved ones again. The cost of survival. He stood at the memorial, looking at the names carved in stone. Each one represented someone who had believed in Earth's future enough to die for it. "Sir," a young officer approached. "The president wants to see you. She's planning a ceremony." "Tell her I'll be there in a minute," Taeyang said. He looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, the Ghost Fleet's survivors were patrolling human space, protecting Earth, watching for new threats. The war had ended, but vigilance could never end. Other species were learning that lesson too. Across the galaxy, civilizations that had relied on the Galactic Council for protection were building their own defenses. The balance of power was shifting. Humanity had sent a message to the stars. A message that would echo for generations. We wanted peace. We were given war. We won. And now we stand ready to help others who face the same choice we faced. Never again would humanity be threatened. Never again would they stand alone. And never again would the galaxy make the mistake of thinking that peaceful species were weak species. They came expecting to conquer prey. They found apex predators waiting. Captain Hannah Park stood in her quarters on the last night before the Silent Dawn was retired. She looked at the picture on her desk, the crew who had served with her through the darkest days. Some of them hadn't made it home, but Earth was safe. Humanity's future was secure. And the galaxy was a little more just than it had been before. That had to be enough. She turned off the lights and walked out, ready for whatever came next. The stars were calling, and humanity was ready to answer.